Okay. All right. So let's talk about the lesson from yesterday. How do you think the lesson went?
Overall, I think it went all right. Um, went as expected. I felt they would grasp it pretty quickly, and I think 90% of them did.
What makes you say that?
Well, they're just walking around in their groups. They're able to piece together the models and get the correct answers. Even when I amped up the questions a little bit tougher, I mean, not level four, but they were able to do that pretty quickly too. And some even started figuring out in their head. So um, I think it went pretty well in both classes.
Okay. Um, okay. So that answers that question. I didn't even realize that was there. Um, is there anything that you would change in this lesson?
Um, the small groups went a lot better. I would have started those earlier because once I started doing the small groups, even those students who were at 10%, they picked it up faster. Uh, so I would have done that a little bit earlier since the other groups are already getting it, had them do independent work and then more time on the small groups. That's probably what I would have
So
done.
you would have. So what I hear you saying is you would have stopped whole group
Right.
shorter,
Right.
and went to the small group.
Correct.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Because when I say 90% of them got it, I could have put them on independent work and focused more on those 10% to get them caught up. I think I could have gotten caught up quicker if I would have started earlier.
Okay.
And instead of waiting until the end of the period and having to rush through it a little bit.
And how would that look next time? So like, I know the majority of your lesson was the whole group.
Right.
How would you have done that?
Well, I would have had independent work, and I had a small group with me, either on the carpet or at that table, depending on how many I felt were not quite grasping the concept. And while they did their independent work, I would have been teaching them the same kind of thing, but at a slower pace, and making sure I make eye contact with all of them. They can't hide in a small group, basically.
Um, what did you see or hear to know that you, like you said, 90% of them did get it?
Oh, the fact that I wanted them to use the tiles, but the fact they were answering it without tiles in the second half and answering it without drawing all the models, and told me they were kind of understanding the basic multiplication of how many three groups of 1/4, and they kind of know that's 3/4. They kind of got that pretty fast. So that tells me they understood the concept, they understood what they were doing already. I still want them just to show me on the models that, it slowed them down. They didn't want to do it, but it showed me they understood what they were doing.
Okay, so for the majority of the lesson when I was in there, they were actually using the fraction tiles.
Right.
Did you actually have them draw the
Yes,
models?
yes. The draw,
and they were understanding
right.
that?
I had them draw basically two different ways. One to show them an improper fraction, one to show them a mixed number. The models. If you, I can show you on the board.
Go
On the
ahead.
back of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if it was like 5 times 1/4, I would have them draw out the 5, and they'd break it up into fourths, of course. I know this is not intending for decision. And they do 1/4 5 times.
Okay.
Like this, and that would get them. They count it 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and they would count it and get 5/4. Now, if we did it this way again, they just shaded 1/4 5 times, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Don't need this. They would have 1 whole and 1/4, giving them the mixed number as opposed to improper. So I showed them both ways. That way, they could show me the improper and they could show me the mixed number. And either way they do, it's the correct answer. So.
Well, good.
Yeah.
And you said that 90% of them were getting that.
Correct. It was my small group that I wish I had more time so they got the tiles fast, but I didn't show them both ways to do the drawing. I just wanted them one way, figure this out, and then we'll push from
Now,
there.
when you did your small group, what group did you pull up last?
My small group was my level ones, basically.
What was that's the only group you kind of pulled up?
Right, the level ones.
So, okay. So you want to focus, that's your 10%. You want to put more.
Because the other ones I felt like they got it. So I gave them independent work. I just want to get them caught up because this is the baseline of multiplication. I really want them to understand at least the baseline before we push for it further.
So when you go into your lesson today, what formative assessment are you going to use, or formative check are you going to use to know that they still have it?
It's a 3-question test, and it's the same. They have to do 1 drawing and 1 with tiles, and they have the tiles on their desk. So like 3 questions, each of them tiles.
Okay, so they have to do it two
ways for each question.
Okay, well, good. I can't wait to see the results of that. What are some prompts that you gave your students to move them forward in their thinking?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back to yesterday. To move them forward in their thinking, I let them work in groups a lot, so that wasn't really moving them forward, honestly. I wanted them to think independently. So I had to wait till independent groups. I should have asked more prompting questions while they're in their whole group, but my whole group was with another group. So it wasn't as independent. I would change that. That's what I would change if I had to change anything. Ask them
Okay.
more prompts.
And then what are some next steps are needed from me? What can I do to help you to get
Just ideas on prompting them forward. I mean, I asked them about the money, what would it be like, and then we went back to the money question, which I think was an aha moment for a lot of them.
Okay.
Stuff like that. Those are ideas that
Okay.
seem to be money ideas seem to be working for them.
Okay. So overall you felt the lesson went well, and mostly you felt like 90% of the students got it, and you were able to zone in on that small group once you went to the small group. One of the things you said you would change was to start small groups sooner.
Correct.
Because you saw them getting it instead of dragging on that whole group lesson. And then you knew this was happening because you said about 90% were able to do it without the models as well.
Right.
One of the things you feel like you need more assistance in is prompting on how to move them forward in their thinking.
Correct. Yeah, analytical thinking.
Okay.
Just move them forward on their own.
I'm glad you recognize that, because I share my notes with you. So here's what I saw yesterday. You were doing some explicit modeling with the students, which I thought was really good. You were asking some thought-provoking questions. You were using the vocabulary. I'm not sure the students were necessarily using it as consistently. You were definitely facilitating that small group work and then whole group. I didn't stay for this part, but you said you did that, so that's a good thing. And then you were allowing the students to engage in that productive struggle, not just giving them the answers, which is really good. And then you were also clarifying and celebrating near the end of that lesson. The students were making connections using their prior knowledge, the repeated addition. They were participating in discussions and analyzing their thinking. They were definitely engaged in independent or collaborative learning using those manipulatives. And then also they were sharing and assessing and justifying their work. But I want them to start using more of the language of the standard. Definitely you were using all the mathematical practices. I could definitely see that going on in your room. One of the things I really liked is how you hooked the students with asking them, if you were to give them $2 and you times it by 2, would they trade? And they, of course, were like, yeah. And then when you asked them, would they trade $2 if you times it by 1/4? A few of them said no, but majority of them was like, yeah, I'll trade. They didn't understand. And then in the middle of that lesson, after you kind of gave them the concept and they were using the tiles, you went back to that question, and then of course they were like, oh no, that's only 50 cents.
Right.
So they were making that connection. You kept the students engaged with using the fraction tiles, and you were very selective of your problems. You started with just, a benchmark number, 1/4, 1/2, and then you went into the 2/3, the 2/6, 3/6, which then the students had to dig a little deeper because it's not just one.
Right.
And then from there I saw where they were even able to do like an equivalent fraction as their answers. So going back to that graphic organizer.
Yeah, I was happy they did that. That kind of surprised me.
Overall, the lesson was fun and engaging. I believe the students understood the why. Why, when you multiply a whole number by a fraction, your answer is going to be smaller than the whole number. One of the things you do well is you give a lot of verbal praise when a student gets the answer, and this goes back to what you were asking me for. I'd like for you to stretch the thinking and asking them, how do you know? It's something, going back to what you had said here,
right,
how to stretch their thinking there, if you just ask, how do you know, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, they're going to, yeah, okay.
And
That's not easy.
It's just
Yeah.
that easy.
Okay.
And then it forces them to explain their thinking. Even if they're right or wrong, still say, how do you know? Because a lot of times when they're wrong, by talking it out loud, they're going to process it and hear it.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And then also other students are hearing their thinking as well. And just being consistent. Every time a student answers that, how do you know? How do you know? And they'll get tired of it, but eventually they'll know, you're going to ask this, so I better,
Right. Figure that out first.
versus just verbally just spitting out an answer and not knowing why they're saying it. Let's see. I'd also like for you to force those students to use the language of the standard. So at one point, you had asked the students if 4 times 1/5 is the same as 1/5 times 4th. And they said yes.
Yeah, I should have said community. Yeah, I knew it too. I went back on that, so I should have said that right there.
Mm-hmm. But making them, and even saying, well, why? What is that? And instead
Right.
of you saying that, forcing them to say commutative property. That's
Right.
a first grade word that they should definitely know. And then also, you said you did this in small group, but I did put this in here when you were demonstrating on the board how to draw. This would have been a good opportunity for students to do this in their journals.
Right. Right.
So that they had that there, but you said you did that.
Right.
But overall, the lesson went really, really well. So, but just, how do you know? Tell me how you know that.
Gotcha.
And it's just that simple. And if you put that in your lesson plans where it says, to drive the instruction deeper, if you just put that every single time, you'll say it, I promise you.
Can't really think about that.
It's that simple.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll look at more. Do you want to hit stop? I'll try to.